Dokja is staring at Sooyoung beyond the bars. No matter how he looks, there's no way she can survive in this place. But at the same time, this woman hinders him if she is left alive. She is the one who knows the most about this world apart from Dokja. The story completely changes in the third or fourth regression from the story's first quarter, and her knowledge might be obsolete. But as Dokja thinks this, he shudders with disgust at himself. He doesn't usually think about killing someone because they are dangerous in the future. Dokja isn't Joonghyuk to be thinking about these things. Yoon laughs as he sees Dokja staring intently. He asks Sooyoung if he can introduce him to his group because they want to start expanding their forces. Looking at Dokja's swords, he concludes that Dokja has a large group. He is quite happy when Dokja agrees to do what he wants, but then Dokja asks him to stop the scene unfolding inside the cage. The employee brims with anger at his bosses, and others in the cage kill each other. Yoon's eyebrows twitch because he knows it's not a joke when Dokja insists on letting go of the slaves. His gesture completely changes, and he tells Dokja that he should know better than this. Yoon's expression is filled with strange ridicule as he mentions that he often sees Dokja reading web novels. Apparently, he watches Dokja as he always commutes to work gloomily, and sometimes he only talks to a few colleagues, including Sanga. Dokja wonders if this has anything to do with the current situation. Yoon laughs hysterically as he assumes Dokja is also secretly enjoying the situation. It feels like aiming a dagger at Dokja's heart from a different angle. He yells about how his life is similar to that of Dokja. Other departments call them the training dummy team, but now their situation has changed. Dokja's vision broadens, and the screams of people can be heard. Looking closer, Dokja does recognize them. Many people trapped behind bars are those Dokja knows from Minosoft. Then Yoon tells him they can earn up to 5,000 coins a day without dealing with scenarios, and a more decadent story quietly overlaps with Yoon's face. Dokja closes his eyes, realizing that sometimes inferiority turns people into monsters. Suddenly, the employee in the cage refuses to kill and drops his sword, causing a loud clanging sound as it hits the ground. He turns and cries, tired of it all. Yoon turns to glare at him. Dokja sees men approaching Yoon and realizes he's going to kill the employee inside the cage. He puts his hand on his shoulder and tells him there's a better way to earn coins. Yoon turns to him. He's thrilled that Dokja will tell him how to make constellations that love actions like this even more exciting. Soon, he reaches for the blade of faith, and it activates. There is the sound of the bars being cut apart. Dokja swings his blade indiscriminately towards the iron. Yoon is surprised while the one inside the cage stands down, fearing Dokja might kill them. When the bars fall, he tells Yoon that he prefers the constellation in such a scenario. Yoon wonders why Dokja breaks the cage while others behind him start to get mad. But Dokja doesn't stop there because right after, he starts breaking other cages, including the one where Sooyoung is. He can't help but feel excited, and then after he destroys the entire cage, he charges towards the wanderers who are prepared to counterattack. However, Dokja moves faster, and before they know it, he cuts the Achilles tendon of those who try to attack him. The knees of those who aren't prepared for resistance become twisted, and Dokja keeps swinging his sword amidst the rising blood. Finally, nobody can stand up when Yoon's voice is heard. He can't understand Dokja's action at all. As Dokja turns to look at Yoon, he receives a few messages and thanks Yoon for creating a situation that the constellations really like. Many constellations following his footsteps are pleased with his decision and grant him 8,000 coins. Yoon's face is turning white, and he is getting visibly angry. Dokja laughs at him and mocks his effort to make a coin farm when he can just hurt a few to get coins. Upon hearing it, Yoon asks all of his men to attack Dokja. There are a large number of wanderers. At this very moment, around 10 wanderers surround Dokja. This number of people around can make Dokja violate the principle of no killing if he gets cornered, but he's not overly concerned. He just has to get out of here. Dokja retreats a bit while hugging Sooyoung's light body. All of a sudden, her eyes flashed open, and she asked why he had saved her. She claims that she can kill all of them when their guards are down. But when Dokja believes her and tries to put her down, she stops Dokja. Clearly, Dokja knows Sooyoung is weak and just messing with her. She clearly runs out of mana and health. As Dokja walks away from the cage, Sooyoung starts asking whether or not the constellation is angry if he drags out the scenario. But Dokja knows a few constellations who like prolonged scenarios for a satisfying ending. Sooyoung frowns and then comments on how cliché it is to have Dokja save her like a damsel in distress. Dokja tells her that she is wrong about two things while lightly kicking a wanderer who tries to attack both of them. Once he has an opportunity to run away, the first thing he tells her is that he's not a hero. He only thinks about the fact that karma points are gained when the system determines that a person has been saved. To put it simply, if Dokja saves her, he will likely get karma points. Sooyoung listens to him intently, and then he says that the second thing she got wrong is that she's not a beautiful damsel distress. She is annoyed that Dokja mocks her at times like this and yells at him to put her down. Dokja immediately throws her to the ground without hesitation, leaving Sooyoung stunned that he actually puts her down. Then, Dokja tells her they should fight together because she loves clichés, and he has already created the stage. There are still many wanderers in front of them, making Yoon can't keep it together anymore while fuming in the background. She notices a sword beside her and grabs it without hesitation. Realizing that fighting with a former enemy is too much of a cliché, they decide to end it as quickly as possible. They are now ready to face the Wanderers, and despite the banter, they are quite well matched. Dokja stabs the approaching Wanderers from the front while Sooyoung stabs him from the back. Both of them exchange glances and simultaneously drag their swords along the man's torso. Blood splatters everywhere. After they manage to kill most Wanderers, Dokja looks at the coins he got from them while Sooyoung staggers with a smile. Her contribution isn't as high as his, but she gets a decent amount of coins. Dokja doesn't get as many coins as he would have without Sooyoung's help, so he thinks of it as a tip. Suddenly, he hears Yoon talking, so he turns to look at him, still sitting on the ground. Yoon is heavily injured, and his face is covered with bumps and bruises, but he mentions something about Dokja's rumors, makes Dokja afraid of what he is going to say next. However, Sooyoung beheads Yoon, and blood spurts from his neck before he can say anything else. Another person who remembers Dokja in reality disappears. Sooyoung sees Dokja watching and wonders if he's sad that she killed Yoon because his face looks so sad. In reality, Dokja is slightly surprised because he doesn't expect these words to emerge from Sooyoung's mouth. He doesn't even realize that he looks upset, and he remembers the time he spent with Yoon on the rooftop. Sooyoung tells him that the constellations don't like frustrating things. Dokja listens blankly to her words and smiles. He replies with the simple fact that she doesn't seem to know, but it is better to listen to this nonsense moderately to get more coins only than kill him after. There is no refreshing feeling without frustration first. Sooyoung believes constellations prefer to kill immediately, assuming they are similar to readers. She also mentions that he doesn't know anything because he isn't a writer. That gets his attention, and as he rummages through the dropped items, he tells Sooyoung that he knows better because he's a reader. Most of the things he finds are garbage, but there is a suit that Dokja can wear called an old gentleman's suit, so he wears it immediately, and it fits him perfectly. It is a B-grade item and only slightly improves defense, but it is better than not wearing it, since Dokja can't wear Samyung's robe forever. After he finishes wearing the suit, he is notified that his current karma points are 25 out of 100. Then he notices one or two people approach. They are all those who are stuck behind bars. Everyone murmurs something about Dokja being their savior, and Dokja raises his hand before they can speak. He is telling them that from now on, they are on their own because he cannot help them again. Faint despair fills their eyes, but it isn't a situation where Dokja can help. It seems cold, but in the end, Dokja saves their lives. Finally, to relieve their despair, he tells them to pick up the items in moderation and then go to Chungmuro if they can afford it. There could be people from Dokja's group who can assist them there. As Dokja finishes speaking, people start picking up fallen items. Their eyes blaze once more as they hope for survival. As he watches them, Dokja understands why the Dokkaebi has brought him here. The people who are victims now try to grab other people's items and start fighting. Soon, a fight ensues, and people start fighting amongst themselves to get the items they desire. This is a world without a king. There is no one to control this world. The Dokkaebi is trying to show Dokja this sight. A world without a king is wild, without the laws and ethics they guard, showing how poor their belief in other humans is. Suddenly, an unexpected voice stops those who are about to wield their weapons. The frightened people look at Sooyoung simultaneously. Sooyoung mocks them for being idiots and tells them to think properly if they want to live, since they can meet other bad people like Yoon and his men. She insists that in this world, the underdogs must unite. So, instead of fighting over a few garbage items, they should combine forces, and maybe they can be stronger than Dokja. Others stop fighting and come to their senses. Dokja is surprised when Sooyoung tells the Wanderers to find their allies until they are powerful enough to survive. It is natural for a plagiarist to say such things, and in actuality, her words are effective. People start to help one another, but something she says reminds Dokja of something. He is about to ask her about it, but Sooyoung yells and finishes her speech before running away, leaves Dokja behind, still confused. However, knowing her stamina is low, she can't run far, so he catches up to her quickly. He mocks her for copying what Joonghyuk says in Tessa, making her turn to Dokja. This is indeed what Joonghyuk says to the survivors who come to him asking for advice. Sooyoung shouts that it's a line from her novel, and she runs faster, still wondering why Dokja chases her. She refuses to admit that she plagiarizes to the end, until Dokja grabs her collar. He tells her she still owes him a favor for saving her in the cage. Apparently, he just needs a power bank, but his remarks still anger Sooyoung. She tells him she has no spare battery because she lost everything in Gwanghwamun. She shows him her phone, which only has a 40% battery remaining. So, Dokja asks her to give him her novel, but she refuses and tells him to pay for it. With that in mind, Dokja quickly grabs her phone, unable to afford it when all the servers are gone. The upset Sooyoung tries to grab her phone back and reaches out her arms, but Dokja stops her with only one hand. Dokja nervously clicks on the novel file. He wonders if her text version is invisible to everyone else like his. However, that is not the case. A front page appears, and he reads the novel. He is reading the first chapter, which looks similar to Tessa's, and he is completely speechless. Then, he looks at the frozen Sooyoung in disbelief that she has copied the entire novel without changing the composition. Sooyoung hesitates for a moment before muttering the terms used in Tessa support constellations, and hers are sponsors. They are debating about the main character before Dokja asks how many chapters of the original she has read. It seems like she is reading up to chapter 99. Sooyoung immediately asks herself why she is answering Dokja's question. So, she is trying to take her phone back, but Dokja easily holds her down. He wonders what the author thinks if he knows that the person who reads Tessa the most after Dokja is a plagiarist. Dokja sighed and asked if her novel had the meteorite's location in the 5th scenario. Initially, she says no, but then she mentions a sealing stone, which, in Dokja's mind, makes no difference. As he expected, Sooyoung finds the meteorite containing the fire dragon. This woman nearly kills him but shows no remorse. That reminds him. He puts the carcass of the fire dragon on the exchange. He wonders if it has been sold and calls out to Baehyung. However, there is no answer. The current scenarios completely disappear unexpectedly. Dokja thinks maybe the Dokkaebis of the Seoul Dome are in a meeting. At that moment, the exchange window and the Dokkaebi bag window open simultaneously. Dokja becomes slightly annoyed that Baehyung is always too busy to reply, but he is still getting bombarded with many spam ads. Dokja first opens up the sales history on the exchange. Surprisingly, someone is buying these expensive items. Even the items that aren't meant for sale are also sold. Someone is really desperate for the fire dragon's bones. If Dokja had known this, he would have set the price as high as possible. The incarnations that possess such power that he can think of are Anna Croft, Ranveer Khan of India, and China's Feihu. Sooyoung then asks Dokja. She wonders why he wants her to go with him while looking at Dokja suspiciously. Her words have truth in them. He nearly dies because of her, but her avatar skills prove useful in the upcoming scenario. So, he lies and tells her he has a better chance of survival if he has trustworthy allies. Dokja pulls out an item he just bought. It's a temporary pledge, and he tells Sooyoung to sign it. It doesn't have the effect of a sponsor contract, but it is effective for short-term contracts. Sooyoung looks at it with surprised eyes. She grits her teeth and refuses to sign it. Even so, Dokja knows she will accept. There is no other choice for a person with exhausted magic power. Ultimately, she accepts it under one condition. Dokja asks her about it, and she will share information with him. She also warns him not to lie because she possesses a skill for detecting lies. Sooyoung gets to the point and asks him about his attributes. He reads her mind, and it is real. Dokja carefully chooses his action, looking into her eyes as he tells her he doesn't know it. When Sooyoung confirms his words are true, Sooyoung makes a stupid expression and raises her hand to her temple. She wonders if her skill is broken, but Dokja assures her that it is normal. Then he asks Sooyoung to quickly tell him the next question because he will only answer 3 questions. She immediately asks why he doesn't know his attribute, and Dokja replies that he doesn't know it either. Sooyoung becomes even more frustrated and reluctantly continues to ask why he is giving up the throne. Dokja figures that this question emerges. She is working hard to prevent the apocalypse, and if she sits on the throne, they are prepared for the next scenario. Witnessing her anger, Dokja reveals to her the truth that Seoul will perish if she sits on the throne. Sooyoung frowned when she couldn't catch Dokja lying. She thinks her skill is broken, but Dokja assures her that whoever sits on that throne will ruin Seoul. Sooyoung's eyes widened as Dokja told her the truth. She is extremely shocked and squeezes out a question after a moment. She asks whether or not he is a renouncee like her, but Dokja convinces her he is not like her. Sooyoung's chin is trembling. Then, something that sounds like horse hooves is heard in the distance. Dokja tells Sooyoung to be silent, and they quickly flee to the rear of a nearby building. Something is approaching. Dokja uses the character list of the people rushing towards him in the cloud of dust. However, the information about this person cannot be found in the character list. Looking closely, Dokja can see that the people running have fur sprouting from their whole bodies. Their faces are monster-like and twice as big as a human. A monster in the lead asks a man because he's looking for someone. The man informs him that the one he is looking for has run away after destroying the coin farm. There is a sound, and the man is killed right away. He is one of the wanderers who present in front of Mino Soft. Dokja thinks he knows what these monsters are. Wanderers have their own ways of survival. Some still exist as humans and make coin farms, while others give up on being humans and walk the path of a new species. The outside species has limits, but because they give up on their humanity, they can grow faster than others from the beginning to the middle of the story. People can only evolve into werewolves using the meteorite's power. Then, behind him, Sooyoung recognizes someone in the group as one of the renouncers. She is pointing directly at the leader of the group. Apparently, she can tell whether a person is a renouncer because she has the skill to read their information and attributes as a renouncer. She speaks in a slightly boastful tone. Speaking of which, Dokja remembers a story that he heard from Minseol. Shortly after the scenarios begin, the first apostle comes to them. This is explained if Sooyoung has the ability to find renouncers. She uses her avatar ability to appear before them. Sooyoung continues to say that's why she doubts his identity. She then stares at Dokja, still convinced that Dokja is a renouncer. Looking back at the outside species, Dokja is told that a few people refuse her offer. That wanderer is one of them. She initially thinks it isn't a big deal since most of them will die early. Then, when Dokja asks about who he is, she says he's Minusong. It is definitely not the name of a character, yet Dokja hears the name somewhere. Now, a recent memory comes to mind. This is the dream Dokja had a few hours ago. He remembers his days in high school and the gangsters who bullied him. No matter how much time passes, Dokja can't forget that name on the badge. It is a Minusong. Sooyoung worries momentarily before saying he's not like the other renouncers. With her skill, she discovers that Minusong reads Tessa until chapter 173. As she finishes her words, Minusong is immediately in front of them. Dokja still can't shake the fact that he is his bully, so he immediately activates his skill to attack him and Sooyoung. Minusong makes Dokja's life a living hell throughout high school. His attack moves at an incredible speed. He hits Dokja in the gut before he can react. Minusong triggers a predator's threat that scares them, but Sooyoung uses her mental barrier and nullifies the effect. She now turns to Dokja, urging him to kill Minusong immediately. In a moment, his hand shoots out and grabs Dokja's throat. His strength is depleted due to the effect of the predatory threat, and he wonders how Minusong became a renouncer. He is staring at Dokja because he recognizes his face. Then, a memory of when he bullied Dokja and forcefully took his phone comes to his mind. But Dokja refuses to acknowledge him in any way, even when he gets him in a choke and lifts him off the ground. Adding to his inability to suppress the effects of predatory threats, Dokja feels how weak his power is. Fighting a 6th grade humanoid species is the worst enemy to deal with right now. It is different compared to the 5th grade fire dragon. Now, his ice attribute overwhelms the fire attribute, and Dokja can take advantage of the dull movements of the big monster, while Sooyoung is too weak to move and can only watch. Then Dokja hears the notification that his 4th wall skill shakes. This situation happened once before. It happens when Dokja fights Joonghyuk in the theater dungeon and immerses himself in his first-person view. Minusong roars and raises his claws. His fist strikes Dokja's abdomen, and his body flies through the air. As Dokja slams into the outer wall of a building, he realizes the true nature of the 4th wall. Actually, he often feels strange. He makes judgments and takes actions that aren't possible in reality. Dokja calmly watches this world from the outside. It's all because of the 4th wall. Then, an angry voice is heard. As Dokja looked up, the angry Sooyoung blocked his way. Her dozens of avatars deal with Minusong in the corridors of the building. Blood flows from Sooyoung's nose, and her blood vessels pop out as she struggles. Sooyoung squeezes out every drop of her already low magic power to exert this strength. She yells at Dokja while her avatars fight relentlessly against Minusong. She is telling Dokja to get up and fight. Dokja slowly raises himself while feeling a sharp pain in his bones. He recognizes this world as a novel due to the 4th wall, but it's shaking now because he perceives Minusong as a reality. Dokja endures the pain and stands up, slowly walking up beside Sooyoung. He tells her it's more fun if they win it the hard way. Sooyoung snickers at him, wondering if he gets beaten up as part of his plan. But Dokja replies that he has just been thinking for a while. She then asks if he recognizes Minusong. Initially, Dokja stares at her and hesitates to answer. Sooyoung hurries, adding that she overhears what he says to him. Dokja replies honestly to the person with lie detection. He confides that Minusong is a part of his trauma in his adolescence days. Sooyoung states that she can help him power up with encouragement, just like what happens in Tessa as she spits out blood. But Dokja is not Hyunsung, and he has to solve this problem himself. His wounds are also more painful than usual because the 4th wall reduces the pain most of the time, and he almost forgets what pain really feels like. Dokja has a hard time going forward when the 4th wall shakes whenever he meets someone who stimulates his traumas. Above all, Dokja is 28 years old right now. He isn't a 17-year-old who gets flustered by a bully. Suddenly, he hears notifications from many constellations, all urging Dokja to seek revenge for his childhood trauma. A bounty scenario appears, where he must overcome his trauma by defeating Minusong. It is given by one who overcomes the late trials. Dokja is holding Sooyoung's shoulder and telling her to stay back. He strolls towards Sooyoung's avatars as they fight the werewolf. At the same time, he spends 15,500 coins to boost his strength. Now, the special option of Unbroken Faith is activated, turns the ether property into divine. There is no reason for Dokja to lose this fight. He is currently experiencing a momentary lapse in judgment due to the 4th wall shaking. Meanwhile, Minusong easily kills Sooyoung's avatars before noticing someone approaching. Then Sooyoung's voice is heard behind him, so he convinces her that he is going to be okay. Actually, this situation is almost exactly the same. However, it turns out differently from earlier, even when his 4th wall shakes again. Dokja runs straight towards Minusong. He can strike him right in the neck. Minusong marvels at Dokja's incredible speed. He decides to retreat, and his body moves at great speed after acceleration is triggered. Dokja lacks footwork skills, so Dokja is forced to use a shortcut. He invests more coins and levels up his agility. If Dokja doesn't have skills, he can use stats. He jumps higher and uses his blade to cut away. He roars as his limbs are severed in an instant. But Dokja notices that, along with the roar, his severed limbs are growing back. This is the privilege of a werewolf's physical regeneration. However, typically, the speed is lower. He is wondering if Minusong receives protection. Thinking about this possibility excites him because the goal of the bounty scenario is to overcome the trauma. The constellation isn't satisfied with an easy kill. Dokja runs around Minusong and turns off the blade. He intends to fight with his fists and upscale his stats again, spending up to 8,000 coins in strength. Suddenly, his body bursts with energy, and he only has a little time before the scenario is over. Dokja charges ahead without hesitation and lands a punch in Minusong's face. He falls to the ground with a loud crash, and blood gushes out of his mouth. Then, Dokja grabs Minusong by the collar and demands an apology for years of torment, all the while raising his fist to punch him again. But his fourth wall is suddenly shaking. Whenever Dokja looks at this guy's face, he feels the 17-year-old inside him shrink back. He grits his teeth, realizing that Sooyoung is right. Even though he is now stronger, he still shakes. Dokja holds him with one hand and continues to punch his face. Minusong mocks him for reading novels all day, and on behalf of the 17-year-old Kim Dokja, he keeps hitting him repeatedly. The nearby werewolves notice the assault but can't come close. Apparently, Dokja gives out a predator's threat despite not using any skill. The fear comes from a strength that is on a different dimension. His 17-year-old self is forever stuck in the past, and his actions are nowhere near enough to make up for what Minusong did to him. A few minutes pass before Minusong starts begging Dokja to stop. He uses his young age at the time to justify what he does, but Dokja knows that degree of malice is understandable in his immature days. However, this is something that can't be understood or forgiven. Dokja keeps smacking his face with all of his strength. He now watches the collapsed Minusong and thinks of his teen years. He is helpless and weak and only knows novels. Still, this is a bit comforting. Just like when he reads Tessa now, the 28-year-old Dokja may be able to assist the 17-year-old in escaping from the nightmare temporarily. Just like Joonghyuk is to Dokja in these days, who goes on a killing rampage to everyone that crosses his plan. Finally, there is a moment when he looks at Minusong's face and feels nothing. Then Dokja is laughing. He feels like he's still like Joonghyuk in certain ways and knows he can do better. But it doesn't stop him from getting his revenge. He throws his last punch, sending Minusong flying a few blocks away and crashing into a building. Ultimately, he bleeds but doesn't open his eyes or talk. Then, a notification rings in his ears, indicating that Dokja has successfully completed the scenario. Sooyoung wonders how he can kill a werewolf with bare hands. The other werewolves have already run away or are cared for by Sooyoung. Dokja looks down at Minusong and tells her he's not dead. Now, the fourth wall doesn't shake when he looks at him. He is unsure if the trauma is resolved, but he gains a little bit of strength to overcome it. That thought alone makes him smile in relief. Suddenly, he hears the constellation one who overcomes the late trials and wants to give Dokja its own stigma. Dokja is surprised by it because his bounty scenario isn't a single constellation request, so it's surprising to give a stigma as a reward. Of course, Dokja still appreciates it. He acquires the stigma of self-justification. Dokja is staring absent-mindedly for a bit. He wonders if this is merely an elaborate joke. Then, Sooyoung asks whether he's going to kill Minusong or not. Dokja looks at her and contemplates his choices. There is no burden since he is an outside species. Some of the constellations of Baeyoung's channel want Dokja to kill him. He looks at Minusong for a while before deciding to let him go and leave. Many constellations question his judgment. Sooyoung wants to kill him instead because she thinks Minusong might have a lot of coins. Dokja tells her to do it, but she probably regrets it later. When Sooyoung is asking him to elaborate, Dokja shrugs and walks away. Sooyoung still looks after Dokja with a suspicious expression. He allows her to do what she wants and kills Minusong with a single stab. Then, after a while, Sooyoung gives a terrible scream and shakes. Dokja can tell the messages that are appearing in her head. There are messages indicating that the Demon King has noticed the murderer's presence and will remember the one who deals the final blow. Now, Sooyoung is officially listed as the Demon King's target. Just like Myungo in the current scenario, Sooyoung looks at Dokja with a pale face and he laughs. At least, he warns her that she may regret it later. Still, along the way, she blames Dokja for it. However, Dokja can't do anything about it. The constellations aren't the only strong ones among the star stream. There are some strong people who refuse to be subscribers to the heavens and travel around planets. One of these superpowers is the Demon Kings. The Demon Kings seek their own subjects, just like the constellations choose incarnations. Corrupted incarnations can choose to join the household of a Demon King. The werewolf is one of his symbols and is located at the bottom of the 72nd Demon King Andra's cast. Andra's blessing gives Minusong the ability to regenerate physically. In the middle of the road, Dokja tries to console her by saying that he knows someone cursed by a demon king like her, but they don't die right away. Come to think of it, Myungo is cursed by the demon king, god of wrath and lust, but he doesn't know what is happening to him. However, Sooyoung's condition has improved. Andra's is not a very high-ranking demon king. She gets the favor of the absolute good constellations and gets more donations. However, Sooyoung tells him the constellation she's after doesn't get along with Archangel sponsors. Dokja can't help but think about it as the realization hits him. Sooyoung notices his gaze and stays silent. She lacks a sponsor just like him. Actually, in the first scenario, many of the survivors don't get sponsors. To be precise, they don't have any choices. However, it is unexpected that a strong person like Sooyoung has no sponsor. Finally, Sooyoung yells at him, stating that she chooses not to pick any in the first scenario. If the sponsor selection can be postponed, it is better to delay it. There are many good constellations, and depending on how the person acts in a scenario, they can literally go from a turd to a Mercedes. The sponsor selection occurs once after the first scenario, and is regularly implemented before the disaster scenarios occur. The fifth scenario is a disaster scenario, so Sooyoung can participate in the upcoming second round of the sponsor selection. Dokja wonders which constellations she will pick as she seeks to attain the great sage heaven's equal. Sooyoung makes a confident expression at his words and tells him that the one she's after is the Black Flame Dragon. The memory of the risk of being tied to this constellation and Namwoon floods his mind. Seeing how excited Sooyoung is when she knows that this constellation is watching her makes him question his life choices. Dokja hesitates for a moment before replying that it is a good sponsor. Sooyoung twitches at his nonchalant tone, and they argue back and forth. After a while, they reach the place that is probably the base of the werewolves. They suddenly hear the cries of the werewolves and people in the distance, as if a battle is going on. Dokja doesn't see any werewolves moving around as guards. Once they enter a bit further, a coin farm that is even bigger than Yoon's comes into view. Dokja is tired of facing these sights all the time. But it seems like the coin harvest is over because no surviving people are behind bars. Sooyoung moves ahead when she suddenly cringes because of the smell. As they head through the imprisonment area to the residence of the werewolves, a more horrifying sight awaits them. Human legs hang. Dokja reads these scenes in the text, but this is the first time he has seen them. There is a fixed way for humans to evolve into an outside species. Simply put, they eat their own people. Sooyoung curses at the sight, and Dokja doesn't blame her for getting upset. But Dokja doesn't feel the same because the fourth wall activates, simultaneously shielding him from the emotional effect. So, to prevent Sooyoung from questioning him why he isn't upset, he tells her that the other prophets tell him she wants to use the information to control the world. Sooyoung sneers because it is just as absurd as Dokja calling her a plagiarist. Her first goal is preventing the destruction, which is why she collects apostles. But Dokja starts dissing her, saying that they are all trash, making Sooyoung angry and yell at him. Suddenly, a loud bang could be heard in front of them. They reflexively held their breaths and reached for their swords. No matter how Dokja thought about it, this was the sound of gunshots. He begins to run toward the sound. Even if the army was still intact, it was ridiculous to deal with a werewolf with guns. But the sight in front of Dokja changed the story. Bodies of werewolves were piled up in front of him like a mountain, and all of them had bullet wounds. Sooyoung and Dokja immediately think about elemental bullets. Dokja saw some people pointing guns in the distance. They were armed with modern rifles, and unusually, they were all wearing prison uniforms. Sooyoung nervously tells Dokja that there is someone like him in Sondimun prison. Then, she's pointing to a woman wearing a mask. It would be hard to know the sex if it wasn't for the long hair hanging down, covering most of the body, including the face. But she's unmistakably the leader. She also added that they are the most powerful wanderers she knows. That makes Dokja wonder why they didn't appear in the battle for the throne. Suddenly, a woman with a gun headed straight to his side. But she wasn't the leader that Sooyoung pointed out. Dokja prepared himself and pulled out Unbroken Faith while Sooyoung tried to manifest her avatar. Unexpectedly, she moved her gun, and the muzzle pointed to one of the mountains of werewolf corpses. The dead bodies collapsed from the bullets. Then, something hidden under the bodies was revealed. It was one of the meteorites Dokja needed to prevent the catastrophe. The yellow meteorite was here. This meteorite was also the source of the werewolf's strength. The woman gazed at the meteorite before slowly turning to him. She seems to recognize who Dokja is. Looking closely, the woman seemed quite old. Based on the wrinkles, she wasn't in her 40s, but at least in her mid to late 30s. Dokja was a bit embarrassed, but he maintained his composure as he introduced himself as Joonghyuk. The one she mentioned is someone he hates. Dokja looked to the side and saw Sooyoung watching him with an absurd expression. If he knew her, she would understand what to do from now on. But the woman apparently already knows that he's Dokja. Sooyoung nodded towards him and silently told him that she was honest. This woman came because she knew for certain who Dokja was. Then she says that the king will entrust this meteorite to him. It was unexpected. Dokja looked at the tall, masked woman in the distance. Looking closely, Dokja felt a sense of déjà vu. But there was something strange. She has no flag, and the woman replies that the king doesn't dwell on such things. The woman continued to say the king would take care of the disaster in the north, but she will leave the other 4 disasters to him. Before Dokja could ask anything, the woman turned and left like her words were final. Sooyoung shouted, but she kept walking away without turning back. She looked at Dokja with confusion, while Dokja quietly activated the character list. But it seemed that the update cycle was back. Dokja nodded, and in a second, the update was completed. Then a window popped up. The woman who's just talking to him is Joonghyuk. Dokja didn't think there would already be a woman with Jin-uchi as a sponsor. In addition, she had the fairly good attribute of Officer of Justice, although it was less than the judge. If the subordinate was this good, he wonders how powerful the king is. He immediately looked at the tall woman. But the information about this person can't be read in the character list. And when Dokja met her gaze, a stinging pain flashed through his head. His heart beat quickly, and ugly memories resurfaced. He looks like he has just seen a ghost, and Sooyoung asks if he's alright. He immediately convinced her that he was fine. The woman caused an even greater shaking than Minwoo Song. The fourth wall responded to people who had an important influence on Dokja in real life. In other words, that woman was someone Dokja knew. But there was only one person in this world who gave Dokja bigger trauma than his bully. Dokja concludes that she had survived the earlier scenario, but he didn't expect her to be in Seoul. Then he noticed the wanderers soon began to move with food on their hands. He now knows that they're the ones who helped the people against the werewolves. It was a march with no hesitation, and the leader moved to the forefront of the group. For a moment, he had forgotten. A person didn't need a flag or to sit on the throne to become king. In this kingless world, there was still a king. After a while, Dokja examined the yellow meteorite they had left behind, and Sooyoung was taking care of the survivors lying nearby. He can feel the exhilarating magic power just by touching the meteorite. It's also called the Moonstone, which is usually a star pierce that hovers in other dimensions. It was truly the same as he had read in the novel. This yellow meteorite definitely contained one of the powers that could counter the catastrophe. Then, a system message was heard. The Moonstone wanted to provide him with a high level of strength. Dokja refused the meteorite's offer without a second thought, because everyone who received the Moonstone's power could evolve into an outside species, like the werewolves. However, the real use of this meteorite wasn't simply to evolve the outside species. After taking care of the survivors, Sooyoung asks if he found anything. Initially, it was a little unexpected, but Dokja is sure she was probably targeting coins. She will need every donation she can get in a place filled with the Demon King's subjects. When he turns, he sees dozens of avatars quickly organizing the surroundings. The corpses of the werewolves were burned. Then, out of nowhere, she asks when he will tell her about what's been happening. Dokja immediately realized her question wasn't about the meteorite. There were 2 types of renouncers that she didn't know about. In addition, there seemed to be a connection between the 2. It was natural for Sooyoung, who was the last renouncer, to pay attention. However, he only knows the leader of the group. He also added that she's not a renouncer. To be precise, she had never read the original novel, and she knew about the plot because he had told her directly. Sooyoung looked like she had been hit in the back of the head with a hammer. Dokja explains that he told her this story because he needed something to tell her when he met her, because he had nothing else to say. Maybe Sooyoung sensed his dark mood, making her hesitate as she was about to question him further. She was silent for a while before speaking about the possibility of another group that knows the future. Dokja understood her concerns, but it should be fine. At the very least, that woman was a person with principles and wouldn't carelessly use the information of the future. Dokja knocks on the Moonstone and tells her that waking up from the catastrophe is more important. This makes Sooyoung watch Dokja like he is insane. A while later, they both sat down, and he said they would start injecting mana into the Moonstone. Based on his calculations, it will hatch in 10 hours, so he will do it for 4 hours, and Sooyoung will cover the remaining hours. This annoyed her because she had to work longer hours. However, Dokja noticed that she might have a higher magic level than her, so he questioned her level. Immediately, the provisions of the temporary contract take effect, and Sooyoung honestly tells him that her magic level is at 55. Dokja was honestly surprised. He thought it would be over level 40 because she could control dozens of avatars. Still, level 55 was almost approaching the scenario limit. But it makes sense that her physique and strength were relatively low because she must have been putting all her coins into magic power. Knowing this, he purposefully changed the hours. He will take 2 hours, and Sooyoung will take 8 hours instead, raising more protests from her. So, Dokja bought a few intermediate magic power recovery potions, impressing Sooyoung because the potions are expensive. However, she still worries because they might get a plausibility warning if they start the scenario early. Hearing it, Dokja assures her that the Moonstone is not a catastrophe and tells her to look it up herself in the novel she copied. He touched the Moonstone and started injecting magic power. Meanwhile, Sooyoung quickly grabbed her phone and skimmed her novel. She was shocked when she found out what he was talking about. She glanced at Dokja, focusing on giving the stone his magic power, and sparks flew around him. 10 hours later, Sooyoung shouted with a nervous face while touching the meteorite. It had started to crack. Dokja opened his eyes at the sound of her shouting. It was a phenomenon similar to when the fire dragon broke out of the meteorite. A brilliant light emerged from the moonstone, lifting some of the darkness of the night. It was an awakening of a powerful presence that gave off a heavy pressure just looking at it. A hand clutches to the edge of the broken stone, and a being steps out of it. Dokja and Sooyoung were nervous since this was the first time they encountered other world species. The item he got from the fire dragon would be helpful from now on. As automatic interpretation started, Dokja heard a voice from the giant figure in front of him. The silver mane reminded Dokja of a wolf at first glance, but he knew he was different from a wolf. Above all, Dokja knew the species of this person. He was one of the 5 dominant species of Chronos, and he's called as Lycaon of the Immunter. Dokja activated his character list, and as expected, the hero of another world had great skills and stats. The average level of the stats was 75. He clearly exceeded the current limit of the scenario, and his role in this scenario is as a guide. After looking at the sky, Lycaon's blue eyes looked down at Dokja. Dokja nodded when he asked if he was the one waking him up. He began to talk, and it sounded like a tutorial. It was funny how he imitated the Dokubi for dramatic effect. Dokja knows there is no tutorial in this world. Every scenario was an actual event, and the dead couldn't come back again. Lycaon assured Dokja that he would train him to prepare for the catastrophe and give him the necessary instructions. Then he suddenly stopped talking. He wonders why he's the only one who woke up after the 4th scenario cleared. Originally, the 5 guides, including Lycaon, would gather as soon as the master of the absolute throne was born. Dokja tells him that they have no king. Lycaon expressed his disbelief and assumed that the king was dead. But Dokja drops the bomb on him by saying that they cleared the 4th scenario without getting the absolute throne. Grim appears in Lycaon's eyes because it's an impossible thing to do, but Dokja tells him there is a method of destroying the absolute throne. Lycaon's expression stiffened. He seemed to grasp his words, and his eyes widened. His silver mane quivered as he looked closely at Dokja. There are numerous constellations behind Dokja, and he knows exactly what he has done to destroy the throne. Lycaon loses his words before he grits his teeth and yells at the sky. He can't believe that Dokja could actually do such a thing. Sooyoung looks at the bellowing Lycaon and wonders if it's more serious than what Dokja made it out to be. Apparently, she also received another world interpreter and heard the conversation. And Dokja confirms the fact that there is no one in the world under the banner of that great god when Lycaon asks about it. Dokja felt scorn as he watched Lycaon get more frustrated, but it doesn't affect him in any way because he already knows them. On the surface, they were dispatched to help this world. However, they had a separate purpose that Dokja would never let happen. He calls him by his first name and tells him it is too early to be frustrated. The prideful prince of the Immunter immediately responded to the change in his attitude. He growled out angrily, but Dokja reminded him the Immunter were the ruling species of Chronos, not Earth. His expression stiffened. Dokja didn't miss this gap and continued to say that there were 5 disasters that destroyed his world. Lycaon gets more upset and bares his fangs at Dokja, but it doesn't stop Dokja from reminding him of the fact that the southern continent of Chronos where he lives was destroyed by the dragon. It is the same dragon Dokja faces, the fire dragon Ignir. Lycaon grits his teeth and tells Dokja that he will regret his decision later because the dragon is turning his world into a hellfire. However, Dokja calmly states that Ignir doesn't come down to earth. Instantly, the anger vanishes from Lycaon's face, and Dokja seizes the opportunity to inform him that he has already slain the dragon. Sooyoung concludes that the dragon he's talking about is the one in Anguk Station. In Immunter, his hometown is now a hellfire, and the corpses of his people are scattered on the ground. He loses everything, including his child, and it becomes the most painful memory he has. Meanwhile, Sooyoung isn't able to grasp the situation yet and asks Dokja about the dragon. Dokja pulls out a blue-colored medallion and explains that anything hatching from the meteorites counts as a catastrophe. Even though it isn't the original Ignir, he still prevents it from appearing in this scenario. Furthermore, the dragon does not appear in the original. The scenario difficulty is ridiculous, but it is adjusted so that it can be cleared if people risk their lives. Suppose Lesser Ignir is released into Seoul and continues to level up. In that case, Seoul will end up the same as Lycaon's hometown. Of course, Sooyoung has no knowledge of such matters and is busy complaining. She glances at the medallion in his hand and asks if that is a protection symbol he earned from killing the dragon. Earlier, Dokja shows Lycaon the medallion. The protection symbol of the Immunter is proof that a person has hunted a disaster dragon. He gets it when he kills the dragon in Anguk Station. If it weren't for his oath of not killing, he might not be here right now. Dokja uses his medallion and tells Lycaon to pay respects to the protector. Lycaon's body shakes as he slowly falls. Now, his knees touch the ground. But there is a severe shaking of his eyes as if he can't admit it. So, Dokja is telling him to do it properly. Soon, his head touches the ground, surprising Sooyoung, who is standing behind him. Dokja looks down at Lycaon. This is the useful part of catching the fire dragon. Lycaon speaks in a quivering voice and apologizes before Dokja finally tells him his name. Once again, he thinks that his name isn't that great. Then he tells Sooyoung that he is lucky with the fire dragon. The other disasters that come are in their original state. He finds it pleasant to see the expression of the plagiarist writer when they hear the word original. He states that their sole solution is to utilize Lycaon, who currently moves cars with his bare hands. Then he throws it with one hand like it weighs nothing. Sooyoung believes that Dokja wants him to fight because he appears strong, but Dokja refutes her since Lycaon is a coward. Additionally, the guides are prohibited from fighting against disasters from another world, meaning they have to take care of the work themselves. Now, Dokja hears Lycaon addressing him as master. The title naturally is for the owner of the medallion. Even though Dokja tells him to call him by his name multiple times, Lycaon refuses to yield. They stand face to face, wind flowing past Dokja's face before Lycaon tells him that he will teach him the secret technique of his clan called the Way of the Wind. This is his purpose behind hatching Lycaon. The 5 catastrophes appear in the north, east, south, west, and center of Seoul, but the southern disaster of the fire dragon disappears. So, the first catastrophe in the 5th scenario is surely the east catastrophe. To prevent catastrophes in the east, Dokja needs to learn the secret technique of immuter. The Way of the Wind is the only answer to the catastrophe of the east. 2 days later, Dokja is already beginning his training. He works hard to learn the skill. Adding to the fact that he reads the novel, he is able to follow Lycaon's movements a little bit. To be exact, Dokja thinks he is following what Joonghyuk is doing. He successfully gains the power, but when he does it, nothing happens. Lycaon hesitates before telling him that he has no talent to learn any skill. It is so sincere that Dokja freezes like he has received a nuclear punch. If this goes wrong, the world may perish because of him. Sooyoung giggles behind Dokja because no matter how hard he tries, he can't gain the skill. She reminds him that he is not the protagonist who can learn this skill in a few minutes. His chest is sore as if he has been stabbed, but he is still confused because he understands everything in his head. He remembers most of the enlightenment associated with the Way of the Wind. There exists a gale in the left hand and a storm in the right hand. The Way of the Wind opens when straight lines and curves meet. Lycaon feels admiration from where he is listening to him. Actually, Dokja is currently muttering the words that Joonghyuk enlightened in Tessa. But it isn't that simple, and Dokja is wasting 2 days already. It is enough to make Dokja go crazy. Now, the problem isn't being solved by the writer's description in Tessa. The explanation is just complete noise to him, and the 4th wall is also useless at this moment. Dokja feels a little feverish as he speaks to Lycaon. He gives him more words of enlightenment. Yin and Yang are concepts from Earth, but Lycaon understands them instantly. He concentrates, and winds from different directions start to form around him. The 2 winds swirl, adding a hot and cold energy to the wind. To be honest, Dokja thinks it is ridiculous. He hears it and carries out the technique instantly. Then why can't he do the same? His pride is provoked, and Sooyoung adds fuel to the fire by laughing at him. Dokja gives Lycaon another set of enlightening words, saying 4 winds meet and form a defense. Now, another 4 winds are added, making it the 8 trigrams. Therefore, the wind is everywhere yet exists nowhere. Lycaon is making a puzzled expression. Now, he bows to Dokja and thanks him. He turns and starts practicing, leaving Dokja confused. Suddenly, notifications ring in his ears, and he finally figures out what is going on. Lycaon gains enlightenment by hearing what he says. Sooyoung laughs so hard that she holds her belly. Dokja feels belated frustration. Amidst his frustration, he hears a voice asking him why he breaks the throne. He looks up and sees Baehung floating in the air. After he opens the communication line, he starts talking with him while Sooyoung talks with Lycaon. He is wondering what happens to the intermediate Dokjubi. Baehung replies that he is being properly disciplined, as Dokja already expects. He also mentioned that his channel had been upgraded again. He will be promoted to the intermediate level next month. That makes Dokja worry that he is going to be busy when he reaches that level. Baehung laughs at his words and assures him that she doesn't care about other incarnations, but she's not going to ignore him. After closing their conversation, Sooyoung approaches him and raises her chin, wondering what they should do now. Then, out of nowhere, Sooyoung volunteers to study the winding path since Dokja is still confused about what to do. But he replies that only people with the protection medallion can learn the Way of the Wind. Upon hearing it, Sooyoung tells Dokja to hand her the medallion, unaware that the ownership of the symbol cannot be transferred. Seeing that she uses her lie detection skill on him annoys Dokja. She is the first person who is more suspicious than Joonghyuk. Upon hearing Dokja mention Joonghyuk, she wonders why he goes through this trouble when he could leave it to Joonghyuk, since he is supposed to do it in the original novel. However, Dokja cannot let it happen because Joonghyuk does not care what other people think. Sooyoung is confident that she can make him like her if it comes to that. Dokja stares at her before saying that it won't work either. Besides, Joonghyuk can't learn the Way of the Wind without the protection medallion. It means the medallion needs to be taken from him. but ownership won't be released until he dies. In other words, Joonghyuk must kill Dokja. Joonghyuk flies from his punch, which is filled with 100 strength. He is certain that the man will kill him without hesitation. Suddenly, someone yells for help. Sooyoung and Dokja are running toward the voice, and they see someone who has found a wounded person nearby. Dokja glares at Baehyung, who is floating in the air, and he sniggers at him. Joonghyuk lies unconscious on the ground. He steps closer to Joonghyuk and speaks to Baehyung. Even if Joonghyuk is nearby, he can't be found in such a timely manner. It is clear that Baehyung has made a sub-scenario to bring Joonghyuk over here. However, Baehyung refutes that there is no evidence to prove it, but Dokja feels it in his heart. Sooyoung whispers to him, wondering what they should do. Of course, Dokja feels like he has to save him. However, if he saves him, he will surely die. Even Sooyoung looks scared that Joonghyuk will wake up straight away. She offers to lock him up, but Dokja worries that he will kill himself if he can't find a way out. Sooyoung belatedly comes to this realization. It is right to assume the worst when things are unknown. If someone makes a mistake and the world is reset, their existence disappears. As Dokja looks closely at Joonghyuk, there is a wound around his face. It feels like someone incredibly powerful is hitting Joonghyuk in one blow. Right now, Dokja stares blankly at his fist, wondering if it is his doing. Now, he is certain that Joonghyuk will definitely kill him when he wakes up. But as he sees him like this for 2 days, Dokja feels remorseful. With this, it may not be possible to restore his relationship with Joonghyuk. Suddenly, Joonghyuk stares at him with bloody ears and red eyes. Both Dokja and Sooyoung are running away as quickly as possible. His heart beats fast as he sees Joonghyuk glaring at him with murderous intent. He shouts toward Joonghyuk from a distance and asks for a truce. But Joonghyuk's eyes don't change. He mumbles something that he can't understand, which frustrates Dokja even more. He believes that the story is easier if it is Lee Hyun-sung or Young Hee-won. Dokja decides to use a skill. What he thinks is obvious, but he needs to check. Right now, something amazing is happening. His eyes widen as he watches Joonghyuk call out to him. He looks at him in a slightly confused state. Joonghyuk is trying to warn him about the danger and blaming himself if the world ends. But as he tries to explain further, Joonghyuk's eyes slowly close. Dokja hesitates for a moment before approaching him. Regardless of his injuries, he automatically triggers recovery when he gets hit. So Dokja wonders what is going wrong and activates his character list skill. There are no problems with his stats. Joonghyuk is still one of the strongest incarnations in Seoul, and his skills have grown compared to the last time he saw him. The problem is his abnormal status. Joonghyuk doesn't yet have the skills of 1000 poisons resistance or immunity to 10,000 poisons. Therefore, poison is currently one of Joonghyuk's few weaknesses. He is like this because he is poisoned. The person watching him in the distance asks if he is Dokja, and tells him that Joonghyuk keeps asking him to take him to Dokja. Sooyoung, who is terrified and has been fleeing, comes back and wonders what is going on. But Dokja doesn't answer. He struggles for a moment before asking Baehyung to open the Dokkaebi shop. After confirming his remaining coins, he purchases items that can cure Joonghyuk. He is affected by the 1000 spirits poison, so it can't be removed simply by eating the Elaine Forest essence. After that, he lights the magic power stove and pours the ingredients into it. Han Sooyoung asks if he's truly going to help him, and Dokja nods before adding that he might come to him on purpose. He is now certain that Joonghyuk didn't come here to kill him, because regardless of Sooyoung's thoughts, he has the best understanding of him compared to anyone else. Then Sooyoung grabs a spoon she finds and gives it to Dokja. Fire blazes and the contents in the bucket start to boil. Based on the color and form, it may seem terrible, but this soup is an excellent antidote. Dokja takes a spoonful of it and blows it a few times to cool it down. After that, he approaches Joonghyuk with the soup and puts it in his mouth. Sooyoung sees him do it and makes fun of him when he acts like they're a couple. Dokja remains silent because he wouldn't give the job to her anyway. It is because of the system message that he hears every time he scoops up a spoonful of soup. Receiving coins every time he feeds Joonghyuk is absolutely amazing. Shortly after, Joonghyuk begins to open his eyes with a slight groan. Sooyoung immediately makes a run back toward a building and hides there. He is still in bad shape, but he is gradually healing from the poison. Dokja doesn't miss his opportunity and takes out one item called the Midday Rendezvous. It is an item that allows for a one-on-one conversation with the selected target for a specified time period. As he sends a message to Joonghyuk, a small messenger window emerges in front of him. The connection is formed, and Dokja asks how he's been doing. He purchases this item for 3 reasons. One reason is that Joonghyuk's tongue is paralyzed by the effect of 1000 spirits poison, and the second reason is to avoid leaking information to Sooyoung. The third and most important reason is that he doesn't want to confirm to Joonghyuk that he can read his thoughts. In the next moment, Joonghyuk's message comes up. He is telling him to move to the east right now. He gets annoyed at Joonghyuk's words. He saves his life, and now he gives him an order. But Joonghyuk speaks before he can say anything. When he tells him the catastrophe of questions is about to wake up, Dokja is a little bit taken aback. He also adds that there is someone intentionally waking up catastrophe. Dokja is frustrated because he can't understand what he is saying, and Joonghyuk frowns. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a group of people worship the meteorite. A woman with white hair walks among the group and directly touches the stone. It's clear that she is the one that Joonghyuk talks about. After a while, Sooyoung and Dokja leave and head for Gangdong-gu. It is at a tremendous pace, and Dokja has to carry Joonghyuk on his back. While running, Sooyoung asks if they can simply leave the wolf. Dokja assures her that Lycaon can feel the master of the medallion and will come to find them when he wakes up. He looks at Sooyoung running beside him and asks for one of her avatars to carry Joonghyuk, but she quickly moves away from him. She doesn't want to carry the one who cuts her head off. Dokja can't say anything to refute her words. Joonghyuk speaks through midday rendezvous, leaving him, but Dokja tells him not to quit acting strong. He can't see his face because he is being carried on his back. Still, he asks if he would really kill him after 2 days when he can move again. Dokja asks half-jokingly, but Joonghyuk's silence makes him anxious. He deliberately reduces the pace at which he is moving, because he is unable to assist him if he desires to harm him. Initially, Dokja attempts to bargain by offering him an oath of existence to refrain from killing him until the end of this regression. But Joonghyuk refuses, so he just asks him to promise not to kill him until the 5th scenario is over. He thinks for a moment before agreeing to it. The oath of existence is a constraint on the person who swears it. A cold flame emerges from Joonghyuk's body and digs into his heart. If he breaks the oath, these blue flames burn his heart. Dokja feels a bit relieved, but then Joonghyuk says that he will hit him once. He is dazed for a moment. It wouldn't be bad if one hit restored his relationship with Joonghyuk. Shortly after that, they cross Cheongdam Bridge and enter Gwangjin-gu. Dokja feels the surrounding ecology is changing little by little. Grass grows on the streets, and instead of rotting bodies, the smell of monster feces fills the area. A trunk of a huge plant emerges from the ground and wraps around the surrounding high-rise buildings. There is a giant flower with an eyeball glaring at Dokja. It is a 7th grade plant species, Yanaspleta. He tells Sooyoung, who is pulling out her weapon, to not act rashly. Everything is fine as long as they don't attack first. However, this doesn't mean that the situation is optimistic. The plant species come after the Great Hole is fully opened. This indicates that the terraforming is underway. The 5th scenario is world versus world. Humanity fights against the worlds that are coming. Just like Seoul suffers from the erosion of Chronos, China faces the 3rd Murim world while Japan faces the White Demon realm. Sooyoung scouts around and finds a monster's colony. Every last one of them is dead, and she wonders what kind of person could inflict this type of atrocity. Dokja quickly reminds her that she's the one who wakes up the fire dragon. Fortunately, at this time, the intermediate Dokkaebi places a penalty on the fire dragon. However, the disaster of questions has no consequences. They move quickly to avoid the monster's colony. Corpses are scattered everywhere in the streets. As Dokja examines the remnants of the defeated monsters, he deduces that Joonghyuk must have passed through this path. He is truly great at walking so far in this physical condition and managing to kill them all. He becomes curious and asks Joonghyuk why he comes to him instead of committing suicide. Joonghyuk thinks about how ridiculous it is, and Dokja can only think of what he will do. If he sees his future in the 8th regression, he won't be able to say this. Joonghyuk also adds that if he's going to give up so easily, he wouldn't have started this journey. It feels like the first time Dokja reads Tessa. He thinks that maybe Sooyoung is right. Joonghyuk believes he knows is the Joonghyuk who easily gives up, easily kills people, and repeatedly causes numerous tragedies. However, the Joonghyuk of the 3rd round isn't yet like that. Perhaps he doesn't know the Joonghyuk of the 3rd regression. He now hears a notification that his understanding of Joonghyuk's character has increased. Meanwhile, Joonghyuk explains that Dokja is the first person to come to his mind. He thinks Dokja is a bit of help since he's the one who smashes the absolute throne. Contrary to what Dokja believes, he gives him an earful for breaking the throne, and apparently, he thinks it is a nuisance anyway. He also understands that Dokja must do it to rule out the god of the other world. Dokja is honestly frightened because he has never really spoken to Joonghyuk before. Putting aside his coolness, he is actually very smart. Then Joonghyuk adds that he doesn't think it is a bad idea at first. However, the issue is what is happening next. After Dokja crushes the throne, the guides scatter, and there is a setback in collecting the meteorite. This is why the terraforming of Gwangjin-gu and Gangdong-gu happens so quickly. The Wanderers use the power of the meteorites. Dokja is initially confused because terraforming doesn't accelerate simply by using the meteorites. But Joonghyuk explains that one of the 10 evils possesses a disaster meteorite. Dokja feels his heart instantly sink. He expects it, but actually hearing it is a different matter. He tells Joonghyuk that he already knows the one who does it. Seol-Woo-Lee is the poison beauty, but there is still a part that he doesn't understand. If Joonghyuk knew that the opponent was the poisoner, shouldn't he have avoided facing her from the front? It seems that Joonghyuk is trying to convince her to be his ally. Now, a scene of Joonghyuk with his party suddenly appears. Dokja remembers Seol-Woo as Joonghyuk's companion in the 2nd regression. In all other regressions so far, Poisoner Lee Seolwa is one of the few companions that Joonghyuk can rely on. Dokja thinks that it is very out of character, and Joonghyuk acknowledges it as well. However, when he faces her, she isn't the person he remembers. Still, he wants to believe for a moment that the woman in his memories is alive. Dokja can't help but relate to the loneliness that he buries deeply. It surprises Joonghyuk that he talks as if he has regressed before. However, Dokja doesn't need to go back in time to understand. He knows that he shouldn't speak about understanding. Still, he wants to say it. Since Joonghyuk will not receive understanding from anyone in the future, he is silent for a few minutes before asking if understanding emotions is one of his abilities as a prophet. Dokja doesn't answer, making Joonghyuk continue speaking. Apparently, he still holds a grudge toward Dokja for kidnapping his sister. Dokja is trying to justify his actions, before they suddenly stop talking at Sooyoung's tense voice. The great hole in the sky emits a bright light, and huge plants, along with monsters, fall toward Gangdong-gu. Dokja curses at the sight, realizing the catastrophe is about to happen. He takes a few more steps and sees several markings on the ground. It looks like graffiti, but it is actually a territorial display. It is a warning that no one should enter. From here on, it is the area of the poisoner. Like the other wanderers, she settles in Gangdong-gu and starts to expand her base. But the progress is faster than he expects. Sooyoung doubts that they can attack them since the group is well guarded. However, Dokja doesn't intend to wage an all-out war in the first place. He only needs the meteorite, so they just have to buy some time to steal it. Then Joonghyuk interrupts. He is telling Dokja that he shouldn't rush it. Even if the disaster begins, the disaster of questions is a disaster that can be suppressed at an early stage. Indeed, it is possible for Joonghyuk but not so much for Dokja. Meanwhile, Sooyoung is starting to manifest a few avatars. Joonghyuk also adds that Dokja has already woken up the guide and received the Way of the Wind. Based on his tone, he is slightly angry that Dokja has taken the Way of the Wind, which he is supposed to learn. Dokja says with a smile that he didn't learn it despite having enough time to do it. He also tells Joonghyuk that the reason behind his inability to do it is because he lacks talent. Dokja immediately feels Joonghyuk's deep contempt in his silence. Even without seeing his face, he can feel his glare burning through his skull. As soon as he hears Sooyoung's warning about approaching people, he quickly hands Joonghyuk over to one of her avatars. The people are getting closer, but something feels strange. Usually, it isn't so loud when a group is in the moves. Now, a woman's clear voice tells everyone to run towards Chinho Bridge. He instantly realizes that they are not the poisoners group. The unarmed survivors run in fear while something chases them from behind. Terrible arrows come flying towards them. The man falls down after being hit by one of them. Then Dokja notices that the man's back quickly becomes discolored and blackened. It is a poison arrow. Dokja looks toward the front and sees the poisoners group. Dozens of men and women simultaneously fire arrows. As Dokja tries to avoid it by moving behind a building, threads of silk spread out in the air. Dozens of webs are arranged at once, causing the arrows to tangle in the thread and not go any further. Sooyoung's eyes widen. The thread is like steel wire. The sharpness of the thread causes the legs of people who cross it to fly through the air, and they all stumble to the ground. All the threads are connected to one woman. Both Dokja and Sooyoung watch in admiration toward her. She wears a tight black battle suit, and two threads stretch out from the fingers of the woman, brilliantly riding the thread of magic. The combination of stats and skills shows that she doesn't have an ordinary sponsor. But when Dokja tries to see her through the character list, she is not even on it. However, Dokja still knows without her saying anything. This woman is Sanga. She freely manipulates the length of the thread and jumps in the air a few times with a magical platform, continuously spreading the thread to the poisoners group. With one pull, she instantly kills all of them, and there is no hesitation in her hand. Dokja hasn't met her in 2 days, yet she is completely different from the girl he knows. Sanga's daggers tear apart the bodies of her enemies as they move. He wonders how she became so strong. Then, Joonghyuk speaks as if he reads his thoughts. He accuses Dokja of lacking the aptitude to raise his fellow companions. Dokja argues that they grow to this extent because he pushes them in the beginning. But it still somehow annoys him that she grows when he's not around. Regardless, there are many enemies, and Sanga is alone. He calls her out in the midst of her fight with the group. She stops when she hears his words. She clearly doesn't expect to meet Dokja in this place. Sooyoung triggers Avatar as if she is waiting. Dozens of avatars disturb the vision of the poisoners group, and he safely makes contact with Sanga. The group members are chasing from afar. Joonghyuk advises him to go back to the high-rise buildings because the most important step is to go up and secure visibility. As they move together, Joonghyuk warns him to be careful of her. Dokja feels confused, but Joonghyuk remains silent. They quickly hide inside a nearby high-rise building. Everyone gasps for air, and thankfully, nobody gets hurt. Dokja looks back at Sanga and asks her how her condition is. It has only been a few days, but the conversation is awkward. Even Sooyoung wonders what he's doing to make things so strange. He looks at her tight battle suit and notices she's well equipped. Sanga takes a glance at Joonghyuk, and it seems like they've been through a lot. Then, she begins to explain what is happening to her after the absolute throne is smashed. She falls to Gangdong-gu. Fortunately, she falls with Pildu. Seeing that she calls him by name, they seem to have become quite familiar with each other. Dokja asks where he is, and Sanga timidly replies that he is injured while fighting the Gangdong-gu group. Sanga bows her head and speaks with difficulty. Pildu risks himself to lure the enemies to the Han River in order to save someone else. Dokja suddenly realizes why Sanga kills the poisoners group without hesitation. He chooses to assure her that Pildu is fine. Since he has a contract with Defense Master, he knows immediately when Gong Pildu dies. Her face lights up with relief. Then Dokja asks where she got those clothes and the dagger. Sanga explained that she had found the green meteorite after separating from Pildu. Dokja is genuinely surprised that she finds it. The green meteorite contains rare items. Out of nowhere, Sooyoung expresses her suspicion because the items she got don't make her as strong as she is now. She then asks her many things about her sponsor, and Sanga is surprised by the harsh questions. Of course, Sanga refuses to answer and asks about who Sooyoung really is. When she reveals herself as the first apostle, the memory of her group attacking their station resurfaces. Sanga raises her weapon without speaking. Dokja jumps in between and tries to prevent any more fighting. She is reminding him that the Chungmuro group members died because of her. Sooyoung also recognizes her and warns Dokja to be careful of her because she's hiding something. She adds that she probably has a big sponsor behind her. Sanga narrows her eyes at the words. Deep down, Dokja wants to deny it, but rationally, he knows that Sooyoung is right. There are also Joonghyuk's words from a short while ago. Furthermore, Sanga is hiding her sponsor from him. Sanga's troubled eyes meet hers. She thinks that Sanga's sponsor is the abandoned lover of the labyrinth. The only person who finds the path through the magic room is the person who hands the thread to Theseus in Daedalus' labyrinth, Ariadne. But as Sooyoung says, it is impossible for her to grow to such a degree with Ariadne's sponsorship. Furthermore, the movements she shows while moving through the air in the previous battle are closer to the Hermes walking method than air steps. Ariadne's current form cannot utilize Hermes' mark. He is about to open his mouth when something unexpected happens. He looks out the window right away. A new Dokkaebi floats in the sky. Dokja notices that he isn't on the same level as Baeyoung's nonsense, but he is still talking nonsense nonetheless. Perhaps there is no one in charge, so this low-grade Dokkaebi takes their place. It is a really bad development. The fact that a scenario is appearing now tells him one thing. It means that the outbreak of a disaster is just around the corner. Since they all receive the disaster prevention scenario, the Poisoners group receives the defend the disaster scenario. The Dokkaebi are still trying to be part of this unforeseen situation. He looks at the party members and says it isn't the time for them to fight. Both Sooyoung and Sanga are nodding at the same time. The time limit for the sub-scenario is 2 hours, so it means the catastrophe is hatched when the clock runs out. The Poisoners group is based in Chinhogong of Gangdong-gu. To be exact, it is an area filled with churches and a cathedral. Dokja understands the stake, but they don't have time, so they must go through the fastest way. He tells Sooyoung and Sanga to work together and advises them not to try to kill each other while on the mission. They watch the group from a high-rise building, and when they get to the group member guarding the place, both of them jump without hesitation. Surprise the Poisoners group as they land behind them with murderous intent in their eyes. Meanwhile, Dokja is jumping to the other side of the building. Sooyoung uses Avatar and takes the lead. Dozens of avatars jump onto the road and attract the attention of the Poisoners group. The confused group members chase after the avatars, and a thin, transparent thread fills the air. The people chasing after the avatars are caught by sharp threads, and their legs are cut off. But this is not the end. There is another strong thread in the location where the people fall. Their heads are cut off and fly through the air. It is a terrifying double trap designed by calculating the angle of the fall. Sooyoung folds her arms and praises her brutality. Sanga turns and glares at her. No matter how it looks, Sooyoung is far more ruthless than she is. In addition to their feelings towards each other, the combination of the two is worth looking at. Thanks to their help, Dokja can dig into the base's center while avoiding surveillance. It isn't difficult to find the disaster meteorite because it is a huge stone over 8 meters high. Certainly, it feels like the fire dragon is no comparison. If Dokja can't stop this disaster, Seoul will surely be destroyed. Now, a woman appears next to him. She has hair as white as snow and lips that are like red flowers on a snowy mountain. He is wondering who he is, as he doesn't resemble her group member. The cold and glassy eyes stared at Dokja, and he felt a terrible spirit emerge from her body. She is the poisoner Sal Wali. In Tessa, there are 3 ways to wake up a disaster meteorite. One way is to let the meteorite hatch in line with the scenario. The second method is to draw out the power of the disaster meteorite in advance. The third and fastest way is to supply magic power to the disaster meteorite. Dozens of Xiaowa's group members are praying. A faint magic power flows out of their bodies into the disaster meteorite. It is called the hatching ceremony. Dokja looks at Seolwa and warns her to stop or she will die. No matter how much he thinks about it, it is strange. In the third round of regression in the original, no one is foolish enough to wake up the catastrophe, even if they borrow the power of the catastrophe. Joonghyuk visits Seolwa in advance because he knows about it. Once again, Dokja is warning her to stop, which only stupefies her. Now, Dokja has no choice but to kill her, so he pulls his sword. When the man behind Seolwa tries to attack Dokja, she simply puts her hand up to stop him. Immediately, Dokja senses a dreadful feeling, and humans praying toward the catastrophe turn towards him simultaneously when he turns. Antennae grow on their heads, and their hands turn sharp like rakes. These wanderers seem to become transformed humans rather than wolves. However, Dokja finds it strange. The meteorite doesn't give Seolwa the power to mutate people. He is immersed in his thoughts when Seolwa orders the wanderers to kill him. The loyalists leap into the air, their wings spread out. Dokja quickly aims the hilt towards them and activates the fire property. Bright flames split apart the air. All species with insect properties are weak to fire, and the ether flames of unbroken faith spread to the skin of the insect humans. The flames are burning most of them. Then, he adds more magic power, and the fire grows bigger until it covers most of the surroundings. Dokja takes the chance to break through the flames and runs towards Seolwa, who is overwhelmed by the fire. However, at this moment, unbroken faith is blocked. Seolwa's fingernails and forearms are tinged in black. He quickly deduced that her poisonous nails could block the blade of faith by borrowing the power of the catastrophe. However, that didn't mean she could prevent all damage. Sparks flew, and Seolwa's body was pushed back a few steps. His current overall stats were the highest among all incarnations apart from Joonghyuk. He might have no talent, but he wasn't weak among the incarnations. So, once again, he tells Seolwa to give up, because there is nothing good for her if the disaster hatches now. Seolwa looked towards Dokja nervously. Then she turned and looked at the meteorite. He could feel the change in the atmosphere, and it felt like she was aiming at the disaster rather than power from the disaster meteorite. Feeling lost, Dokja activates the character list and reads the summary. From there, he figures out that there's a parasite called Antinous controlling her. Then, sentences of some pages flowed in the back of his mind. Dokja recites what has been shown, and Seolwa is surprised he would know this. On the day Kronos was destroyed, the 5 dominant species of Kronos elected one hero from each species. The 5 chosen heroes shamefully survived the destruction and carried on Kronos' path. They were sent to another world through a contract with the star stream. They came to that world, encountered other species, and promised their lives in exchange for stopping the disaster there. A non-human cry emerged from Seolwa's mouth at the story. She wants to know how Dokja knows this story, but he continues, saying that she is not Seolwa Lee but Parasite Queen Antinous. Dokja wonders why a guide is trying to wake up the catastrophe. Now, Seolwa is being manipulated by one of the guides, and her face morphs into the face of an insect. Dokja is looking at the dead bodies of the lower humans. Just like with Lycaon's meteorite, it isn't the power of the catastrophe but the power of Kronos' guide that promotes human transformation. He now asks her what she gains by doing it, but she doesn't answer and leaps to Dokja with her claws up front. He effortlessly stops her attack with his sword, then grabs the collar of her robe and throws her several feet to the ground. Upon impact, blood gushes out of her mouth, and she wonders how Dokja can have so much power. He approaches her and reminds her to do the right thing as a guide. If possible, he doesn't want to kill Seolwa. The poisoner becomes one of the 10 evils after being infected by the parasite, and she may not be one of the 10 evils if the infection is removed. Now, the messages of the midday rendezvous blink in the air. Joonghyuk tells him to kill her. Currently, he is on the rooftop of the building, and he watches everything that happens with the help of Sooyoung's avatar. He asks Dokja to consider the important thing is not her life but the survival of this world. Because of the distance, he can't see Joonghyuk's expression. He worries about this world rather than the woman to whom he once gave his affection. Joonghyuk's voice is steady and firm, but Dokja knows if Seolwa dies here, Joonghyuk will someday collapse. The deaths of his acquaintances pile up, gnawing at his memories and making his mind weary. Seolwa's mouth speaks as the Parasite Queen. She has a deep-seated hatred for humans. A black liquid is flowing from her hand. It is the same poison that paralyzes Joonghyuk. Dokja takes a few steps back, but some of it hits his hand, and the wound blackens. Joonghyuk asks if he has a countermeasure to the Thousand Spirits poison, and Dokja confidently says he does. Now, he asks Antinous about the sponsor behind Seolwa. Dokja quietly puts his hand on his back and reaches for a book. It is one of the greatest records of Oriental medicine in the East. The Dongwi Bogum is an item he collects in the 5-person dungeon during the king's qualifications. During the scenario, all the kings frantically try to get the 4-yin demonic beheading sword. Many items are thrown away because people don't know their value. Among them, Dokja collects the Dongwi Bogum. It is a star relic that can be completed after collecting 25 parts. Unfortunately, he collects only 8 pieces, but that alone is enough to see an effect. Even if he only collects 8 parts, the Dongui Bogam has the same effect as the S-grade immunity to poison bead. The confused Lee Seolwa shouts in frustration. Dokja explains that Thousand Spirits poison is a poison that cannot be countered with ordinary poison resistance. But it is possible for the Dongui Bogam because the constellation that made the Thousand Spirits poison is the author of the book. According to the records in Tessa, a poison is made by analyzing 1,000 souls. The heavenly poison flows out of Seolwa's body, creating the Thousand Spirits poison. Dongui Bogam is written about Hyo-jun's failure to reach Thousand Spirits poison. Before him, Seolwa grows angrier, but Dokja dismisses it as nothing and tells her to leave the body. He is trying to talk her out of it, and maybe if she turns her way, she could become a constellation someday. The Parasite Queen, Antinous, is a strong hero. She can become a constellation if she continues to be a guide and accumulates history. But her frown deepens. The problem is that she thinks of humans as enemies. Dokja expresses his condolences for her world, which has been destroyed, but that doesn't mean she can destroy Earth. However, she doesn't listen to him and moves to attack him. Dokja is quick to move and lands behind her. When she tries to attack him with her poisonous arm, he grabs it with a firm grip. Actually, he doesn't want to use this method to cure her, but it seems like he has no choice. Dokja has an incomplete version of Dongui Bogam, so he can't do miracles like making a powerful poison or saving a dying person. However, he can do simple treatments like taking a parasite out of a body. He presses at different pressure points on Lee Seolwa's body. It is his first time doing this, so he doesn't know if it will work. Not long after that, Seolwa lets out a wail. As she kneels on her hands and knees, attempting to endure the agony, he ignores her. After that, she spits out a yellow liquid that ends up all over the floor beneath her. Seolwa's eyes open slowly. Her consciousness returned to her eyes, but there was still no focus. She can't see Dokja's face clearly and wonders who he is. Dokja is well aware of the events that will happen if he answers this question. A similar thing happens when Joonghyuk saves Seolwa in the other rounds. So, he only said that Joonghyuk sent him. Right after that, Joonghyuk's voice pierces his ears, warning him not to do anything stupid. He ignores him and informs her that she will soon discover who he is. She has to become part of Joonghyuk's group, because after the prophets appear and the absolute throne breaks, the flow of this world is slowly changing from what he knows. That's why it is necessary to balance the important events directly. Suddenly, he hears Sangha calling him. Dokja turned around and saw Sooyoung and Sangha approaching his way. This fight hasn't ended yet. The mucus that escapes from Seolwa's body gathers in a ball in the air. The Parasite Queen Antinous is scary in parasitic mode but becomes even scarier when she doesn't have a host. The mucus moves like a small bug and forms the shape of a woman. She has dragonfly-like wings and a tail that resembles a scorpion. She is covered in an insect's shell, and apart from the face, she looks more like a bipedal creature than an insect. Her sharp tail goes at the speed of light and aims for his stomach. It is so fast that Dokja can't avoid it despite having over 50 levels of agility. He narrowly catches the tail before it pierces him, but if it hits, he definitely gets a hole in his stomach. She chuckles as she uses the fact that Dokja is holding her tail to fly towards him and land a hit. He gets knocked onto the ground, and a strong pain fills his body. Dokja already expects that she is as strong as Lycaon, who emerged from the yellow meteorite. However, this doesn't mean he has no chance. It is a clear violation of the scenario rules for the guide to cause such an uproar before the 5th scenario ends. She is even trying to hatch a disaster, so she has given up on her probability. The sign of a probability storm descends on Antinous' body. As time passes, the collapse of her body accelerates, even if he doesn't attack. This means that Dokja has to fight to buy time. The problem is how much time he can buy before dying. Right now, the protection symbol of the immuter shakes. That reminds Dokja that he doesn't need to fight her. He holds his aching body and says that to her. As he speaks, a flash of silver light crosses the sky, causing a sonic boom. A gorgeous mane scatters in the air as something lands in front of Dokja with a loud roar. He is none other than Lycaon. Antinous, who is watching him arrive, immediately recognizes him. Lycaon immediately turns to glare at her, wondering why she fights the humans, but Antinous mocks him for it, and they get into an argument. Seolwa retreats to a nearby building, and Dokja's party watches silently, confused by what is happening. Lycaon reminds Antinous of their mission to defend the terraformed planet and rebuild Chronos' civilization on Earth. When Antinous hears the words, rebuilding Chronos' civilization, she is no longer laughing. She gives up on that plan. But Lycaon still tries to convince her that everything will be different from before. Sooyoung quietly approaches Dokja while listening to their story. She lacks knowledge about the specifics of this situation. The guides don't have such an in-depth conversation in the current 3rd and 4th regression. Now, they are talking about something vague. Antinous continues to speak, expressing that she is only here to seek revenge on her destroyed world and doesn't care about the probability of the star stream. Lycaon exposes his fangs, and afterward, she reveals that the wolf has never once won against the insects. The battle between the wolf's prince and the parasite's queen begins. She flies high to the sky when she roars that he's not the same wolf she knows. But Antinous underestimates him and uses his accelerating wings. Her wings flap thousands of times per second, and she instantly appears in front of Lycaon as if she teleported. Her arms turn into sides and fly towards Lycaon. It is only one attack, but it can mean the difference between defeat and victory. But right now, Lycaon's movements are slightly faster. He avoids it in time. During the decisive moment, Antinous' attack slows down while Lycaon's movements accelerate. It is the difference between life and death. Antinous' compound eyes blink with surprise. Sanga asks what type of technique this is. Dokja tells her that it is the way of the wind. At first glance, the two seem to change speed. But this is actually Lycaon's ability. The surrounding atmosphere flows according to Lycaon's will. This is why Dokja needs this skill. If he learns Way of the Wind, he can replace the necessary skills with that one skill. Lycaon lands a kick that hits Antinous' abdomen. His blow is filled with the wind's acceleration and strikes the upper part of Antinous' shell. She gets thrown for several feet and lands with a loud crash. Lycaon roars and tells her to surrender. He manifests the sharp claws of the wind tearing at her wings, and she won't be able to escape it. His blow is filled with the wind's acceleration and strikes the upper part of Antinous' shell. Antinous loses half of her wings, and she falls down.